If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. I want to start by thanking our many listeners who've contacted us to thank us for the small role that we played in the presidential pardon last Friday of decorated New York Police Department Detective Michael McMahon. McMahon, a retired police officer who served the people of New York City with distinction and honor, was unjustly charged by the Biden Justice Department because in his work as a licensed private detective, he bumped into a massive communist Chinese spying operation here in the United States. Rather than charging the Chinese nationals who were in this country illegally and had embezzled millions of dollars in order to conceal the role of the communist Chinese right here on American soil, they charged Michael McMahon with violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, despite the fact that during his trial, never produced any evidence whatsoever that McMahon had been paid by any foreign entity. McMahon's wife, Martha Byrne, better known as an Emmy-winning actress for her role in As the World Turns, Hospital, and a number of other soap operas and dramas, came here in the Stone Zone to talk about that case, and evidently President Donald Trump heard that incredible interview. So congratulations to Michael McMahon and his wife, Martha Byrne. Justice has finally been served in this case. I'm sure his 3 children are glad to have him back home. And God bless President Donald Trump for doing the right thing and securing justice in the case of this New York cop hero. In the meantime, with the government shutdown now reaching over 40 days, it appears that we may be on the verge of a solution. I'm in Washington, D.C. today, where everybody is talking about the fact that a group of Democrat senators have reportedly broken ranks with Senator Chuck Schumer and are ready to join Republicans to reopen the federal government. Yesterday, the U.S. Senate voted 60-40 to advance legislation that would finally end the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. I believe there are 6 or 7 U.S. senators now reportedly ready to vote with Republicans to reopen the government. Schumer, of course, is angry about this, as is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, interestingly enough, used to criticize billionaires and millionaires. Now I noticed that he only criticizes billionaires. That's because Bernie Sanders and his wife became millionaires after skimming millions of dollars from his 2 presidential campaign in the form of media placement fees. Now, that action is not illegal, but I would argue that it is unethical unless he informed his donors that he and his wife were going to materially profit from their campaign contributions. Therefore, Bernie Sanders is a massive hypocrite. You see, he likes socialism for you, but not for Comrade Bernie. Bernie Sanders said, if Democrats cave on this issue of the government closeout, what does it say to Donald Trump? It gives him the green light to go forward towards authoritarianism. And I think that would be a tragedy for this country. See, this is the thing about Democrats, particularly leftist Democrats like Bernie Sanders. They are always themselves doing exactly what they accuse us of. These are the people who weaponize the Department of Justice against Donald Trump and his allies like General Michael Flynn and, well, yours truly. These are the people who decided to cancel and censor anyone on social media, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, then Twitter, or even YouTube, if they supported Donald Trump or if they questioned the outcome of the 2020 election, something every American has a First Amendment right to do. Now, House Republicans will still need to sign on to the measure to reopen the government. Then it will need to be signed onto by President Trump himself for the government to actually reopen. Things could still go haywire in the process, but This Democrat revolt against Chuck Schumer's kamikaze tactics against the American people is a sign that not everyone in that party is completely anti-American or has lost their mind. Meanwhile, some more good news. President Donald Trump issued a pardon today for former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, former Congressman Mark Meadows, Turning Point Action Chief Operating Officer Tyler Bowler, Election Integrity Attorney John Eastman, and virtually every person who stepped up as an alternative elector after the 2020 presidential election to oppose the avalanche of fraud that I believe occurred in that effort to successfully install Joe Biden in the White House. I've said this before in the Stone Zone. I will say it again. Forming an alternative slate of electors within a given state when there is a dispute, potentially a legal battle over the outcome of the election in that state is not a crime. In 1960, for example, when the results in Hawaii were in dispute, on election night it appeared that Vice President Richard Nixon had won Hawaii, but the campaign of later President, then Senator, John F. Kennedy disagreed. Kennedy formed an alternative elector slate, insisting that once the absentee ballots had been counted in Hawaii, that he, Kennedy, would be the winner. Turned out to be right. Now, if Kennedy's campaign had not formed that alternative elector slate to be seated in the Electoral College, he could not have won the votes from Hawaii. Perfect example, although in the election of 1877, the election of Thomas Jefferson, there were multiple alternative elector slates. This is a long piece of history. It's only because of the actions of Special Counsel Jack Smith and the group over there at MSNBC and CNN that the impression got created that this was somehow a crime. So when pro-Trump patriots put up their slates of alternative electors, assuming that there would be a legal challenge within the state to the state's election results based on ongoing election fraud investigations, they were merely preserving their legal rights. Years later, after Democrats decided to repaint this as some kind of grand conspiracy, this was recast by Jack Smith, the special counsel, and by the media as an attempt to, quote-unquote, steal the election. Dozens of patriots had their lives upended. The Gateway Pundit even helped convene a grassroots telethon-style fundraiser to help awareness for their cause. I think that was about 2 years ago, raising about $100,000. Many of the patriots in their 60s and 70s would have to spend their final days in prison if they were actually convicted. Now, there is a catch here, and it's an important one. The president, of course, does not have the authority to pardon someone who is charged with a state crime. So these pardons are largely symbolic. They can be used in court should these alternative elector slate questions ever get to the state courts. But such a prosecution in Georgia fell apart. Hopefully, the states will dismiss these charges. Nevada is another example of a place where, frankly, those who formed an alternative elector slate, because of their concern with the actual election results and the integrity of those results on election night, still face the possibility of jail or heavy fines. Governor Joe Lombardo, a Republican, could pardon all of those charged, but so far he has not done so. We'll be watching this very closely, but in the meantime, God bless President Donald Trump for doing the right thing and helping at least clear the name of many of those who did an important service by standing up for election integrity. We'll be following this question most closely here in the Stone Zone. Meanwhile, President Trump is being ridiculed by saying that he's prepared to pay a $2,000 tariff dividend to every American taxpayer. President Trump is pledged to give $2,000 in this dividend so that Americans can share the wealth that has been amassed because of his incredibly successful trade policies. President Trump said, "People that are against tariffs are fools. We are now the richest, most respected country in the world, with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are higher than ever. We're taking in trillions of dollars and will soon begin paying down our enormous debt, which has surged to $37 trillion. There has been record investment in the United States. Plants and factories are going up all over the place. A dividend being paid to each person of at least $2,000, which would not include high-income people, could be paid to everyone. Now, elites are ridiculing this idea, but folks I talk to in the street think it's a great idea. How about that? Instead of you paying the government paying you. I kind of like this idea. This comes after 40 days of a government shutdown that has shown signs of ending as Democrats are beginning to rebel against the party leadership to come to terms with Republicans and get our government open again. President Trump's policy will help Americans come to support tariffs, which are the key to restoring lasting prosperity. All the way back in 1988, when I first urged President Trump to consider a serious bid for the presidency, he always argued that our trade policies were inequitable, meaning that they were beneficial to our trade partners, but they were rarely beneficial to the United States. Tariffs have come under fire not only from Democrats, but also from some free market Republicans who have argued that tariffs are a tax and should not be imposed. But the free market ideologues are missing the forest for the trees, in my opinion. They ignore the fact that the country has been sold out to foreign interests and ravaged by these one-sided trade policies literally for generations. This cannot be undone with slavish devotion to the crooked, rigged marketplace. President Trump's tariffs are dropping a nuclear bomb on the globalist trade status quo, reclaiming our independence from China, and the dividend from the successful tariff policies are about to make Americans about $2,000 apiece richer. I say send those checks. Meanwhile, New York Governor Kathy Hochul is attempting to prevent a plan by New York City's Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani to offer free bus rides to city residents in the name of equality. Governor Hochul said, "I cannot set forth a plan right now that takes money out of a system that relies on the fares of buses and subways. But can we find a path to make it more affordable for people who need help? Of course we can." Of course, she hasn't been very specific about that. So even though Governor Hochul endorsed Mamdani, it's not surprising that she would push back against some of his more radical policies that are destined to backfire spectacularly. The egomaniacal far-left dialogue is not expected to take this particular challenge lying down. He could cause serious problems for Governor Hochul among her base heading into an election season if she doesn't acquiesce to his socialist agenda. Mamdani is not just another Democrat Party hack. He's a member of the Democrat Socialists of America who have been steeped in the politics of division, believe that the ends justify the means, and would not hesitate, if necessary, to end the unpopular political career of Governor Hochul if he believes a more radical successor could come in the wake of her destruction. Hochul here, in my opinion, is between a rock and a hard place as she faces a hard-charging Republican contender, Elise Stefanik, in next year's gubernatorial election. The latest college poll that I saw, Emerson College poll, showed that Elise Stefanik only trailed Governor Hochul in the overwhelmingly blue state of New York by 5 points. Hochul has nobody to blame for herself, and her political demise may be imminent because of her poor decisions in coalescing behind this Islamic scourge, Mayor Mamdani. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
I'm not your stepping stone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani has not been sworn into office yet. The city's already going off the rails. Throughout his campaign, the New York City Police Department was atrophying at a rate of 350 personnel per month. That number will now go up exponentially as Mamdani comes into power and begins to further hamstring law enforcement and blame them for stopping crime. Mamdani is not concerned, as he knows this will actually give him an excuse to enact his actual defund the police agenda. It's interesting that during the campaign, Mamdani tried to back off his many public statements in which he said that he favored defunding the police. But Elon Musk, who now owns X, formerly known as Twitter, actually pulled together all of those posts and posted them in the closing days of the election. Mamdani said, I'm not worried about the backlash. What I'm worried about, frankly, is the continuation of a retention crisis that we've only seen deepening during the course of this campaign. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've asked police officers for far too long to do much more than just police work. We asked them to be responding to the mental health crisis and the homelessness crisis, and that's why we're going to create a Department of Community Safety that will be tasked with accomplishing those facts and allowing police officers to be police officers yet again. What Mamdani really is saying here is that he will enact the Black Lives Matter dream policy of replacing law enforcement officers with social workers. Meaning that left-wing activists who believe that criminals should be coddled will be hired in place of actual law enforcement officers. Expect more people who, like the heroic Daniel Penny, have to stand up and fight for the innocent themselves to be charged and have the book thrown at them in these instances. Meanwhile, career violent felons will be let out of jail without bail, and they won't even have police to deal with when they're out there committing more crimes. This is the recipe for disaster that I have predicted for New York City. The city is in a world of hurt. Elections have consequences, and these consequences may be the most dire we've ever seen, perhaps in our nation's history. I know a lot of younger voters voted for hope and change, and they bought the idea that Mamdani was some grassroots Robin Hood who had risen from a citizen-oriented, citizen-fueled campaign to take on the special interests and the dark money. But as my friend Sam Antar over at whitecollarfraud.com has proved, Mamdani was actually elected by a complicated series of nonprofits, 501c3s, 501c4s, charitable organizations, and political parties acting illegally in concert to pour billions of dollars of foreign money into Mamdani's campaign. I'm Roger Stone. We're talking about the consequences of New York City's most recent election for mayor. One more piece of good news I want to mention, again, overwhelming response from our Stone Zone listeners. Roughly a month and a half ago, my two Yorkshire Terriers, Mimi and Pee-wee, were purposely poisoned by some perpetrator, and both struggled for life. Only Mrs. Stone's very quick action brought them very quickly to the veterinary hospital. And while Mimi had a complete and total recovery, Pee-wee has struggled. On Friday, we got back the first perfect blood test from the veterinary hospital, and Pee-wee 2.0, our beloved Yorkshire Terrier, is back to full health. God bless you and the many listeners who prayed with us for that result.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. I met with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this morning. Scott Bessent, in my view, may be among President Donald Trump's very best appointees. He is a free thinker, a libertarian, a strong supporter of cryptocurrency, and a believer in gold. I think in his heart of hearts, Secretary Bessent would probably like to repeal the federal income tax law of 1913, probably like to do away with the Federal Reserve as well, although he didn't say either one. I've read a great deal about what he said. Last weekend was kind of amazing. He actually schooled the Democrat hack George Stephanopoulos. Remember him? He came out of Bill Clinton's campaign, but he now poses as a journalist at ABC's This Week show. But Bessent actually schooled him over his grotesque partisan hypocrisy regarding the current government shutdown. In the interview, Bessent made it clear that Democrats are responsible for the slowing of economic growth that was previously roaring due to President Trump's low tax and tariff policies. He gave straight-talk answers to Stephanopoulos on the state of affairs. Bessent said, we've seen an impact on the economy from day one, but it's getting worse and worse. We've had fantastic economy under President Trump the last 2 quarters, and now there are estimates that economic growth this quarter could be cut by as much as half if this shutdown continues. There is, of course, the human cost. And what we're going to have the biggest travel day of the year, that day after Thanksgiving, we could end up with shortages, whether it is our supply side chain or whether it is for the holidays. So cargo and people are both going to be slowed down here. You were involved in a lot of these kind of tactics in the 90s, Bessent told the former senior advisor to then President Bill Clinton, then pointing out to Stephanopoulos' own previous statements accusing the Republican Party of terrorism and creating a hostage crisis during the government shutdown of 1995. Stephanopoulos also amplified his rhetoric in his own memoir when he wrote his book, All Too Human, after Stephanopoulos asked about President Trump's calls to end the filibuster and questioned if that was the best way to end the shutdown. Bessent pointed out that the power is in the Democrats' hands. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent said, you were involved in a lot of these very tactics in the 90s, noting that Stephanopoulos had accused the Republican Party of terrorism. Once again, Stephanopoulos suddenly wanted to change the subject. It's not surprising. Bessent's exchange with George Stephanopoulos was a masterclass on how to politely and smoothly disembowel a fake news hack pretending to be a journalist. I really believe Scott Bessent is among President Trump's most effective cabinet appointees. Meanwhile, weeks after FBI Director Kash Patel announced that there was a widespread sports betting scandal with NBA players and coaches allegedly fixing games, 2 Major League Baseball pitchers have been indicted on similar charges. Pitchers Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Claus, both of the Cleveland Guardians, formerly known as the Indians, have been accused of illegally conspiring with sports bettors to throw pitches so the bettors can make money on unlawful wagers. These sorts of bets, called prop bets, allow gamblers to wager on different occurrences within a game. In this case, the bettors were allegedly betting on whether a pitcher would throw a ball or a strike. Because Ortiz and Clays deliberately threw balls, according to the allegations, bettors were able to make wagers and cash out because of their agreements with the pitchers. The whole thing is incredibly corrupt. This goes to show that woke sports leagues can be rigged. You can't trust anything you see from these athletics today. Gone are the days of greats like Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle. Now we have people from the third world who are taking payoffs left and right, despite the fact that they're making multi-million dollars per year as professional players. Where is the professional pride? Where is the respect and loyalty of the fan base who want to see you win for their city or their franchise? It just doesn't exist. It was wiped away as American culture has disintegrated. Now sport leagues are mostly just bread and circuses for the masses to be distracted as globalism takes further hold of our lives. A rare exception is the UFC, which allows their fighters to speak freely and hosts President Trump and honors him on broadcasts. The NFL actually had President Trump speak at a game he attended during yesterday's broadcast, so perhaps the sports culture is moving back to normalcy, but not so fast. If you're just tuning in, we're in the Stone Zone and our political coverage continues. The British Broadcasting Company Director General Tim Davie and their news chief Deborah Turness have both been forced to resign after the state-run news agency was exposed for editing footage of President Donald Trump to make it look as if he was ordering an insurrection on January 6th, deliberately omitting footage that showed President Trump telling his supporters to protest peacefully against election fraud. The BBC documentary aired shortly prior to last year's election, showing a clip from President Trump completely out of context. Whistleblower Michael Prescott, who formerly was the BBC's Editorial Guidelines and Standards Advisor, exposed the BBC's having doctored a clip by splicing together different parts of President Trump's speech that day. He was appalled and refused to be silent. The BBC internal staff also voiced concerns about the dishonesty of the editing, but they were ultimately overruled and ignored. So these two BBC hacks are nothing more than sacrificial lambs, state-run agencies in the business of propaganda. They were just desperate, got sloppy, and well, they got caught. They'll be back in the business of manufacturing the news again tomorrow, unfortunately. Even though it's a British agency, their reach is, of course, worldwide. When I last visited London to address the Oxford School of Politics, I had a rambunctious interview with a BBC talking head. And although I think I routed him when he accused me of Russian collusion, frankly, I have turned down every request to appear on BBC since that time, despite their worldwide reach. Why? Because they are fake news. They are guilty of everything that the Russians are accused of doing. President Trump should consider sanctions as a result of this disgusting outrage by the British. Meanwhile, the U.S. Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, announced earlier this year that the U.S. military under his stewardship would achieve drone domain dominance by 2027. And now it appears that he's moving diligently towards that goal. The U.S. Army reported focusing on securing 1 million drones over the next few years as the military becomes increasingly modernized with technology and artificial intelligence. Previously, the U.S. military had been increasing their stock of drones at the rate of about 50,000 per year, but they will be increasing it as the U.S. sends a powerful message to both the Russians and the Chinese. Secretary Hegseth said, "We're not just buying something, we're solving life and death problems for our war fighters. We're not building for peacetime, we're pivoting the Pentagon and our industrial base for a wartime footing, building for victories should our adversaries challenge us." He actually used the acronym FAFO, which means, well, for purposes of this family-oriented radio show, mess around and find out. The drone acquisition is a natural outgrowth of the DOGE project by Elon Musk to modernize government and make it more efficient. These drones could easily be used in a myriad of ways to keep servicemen and women out of harm's way in combat zones and save thousands of lives of our soldiers. No doubt the Trump administration has the most noble of intentions for these drones, but they should fall into the wrong hands and be used against the people by a Democrat administration. That could be Orwellian and, well, catastrophic. The people should exercise their Second Amendment rights and perhaps amass some drones of their own just in case that worst-case scenario should come to pass. We pray for peace, but we must prepare for war. Meanwhile, President Trump will host the Syrian president at the White House. That was today, actually. President Donald Trump hosted the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, at the White House today, which marks the first time a leader from Syria will be traveling to the White House. 6 months ago, the United States and the United Nations lifted sanctions related to terrorism on the Syrian leader. Sharaa has been Syrian leader since December of 2024 after the longtime Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad was deposed. Sharaa was the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which began as the al-Nusra Front, an affiliate of al-Qaeda. Now, the group was named as a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department in 2018, but that was removed last year as Sharaa has gained credibility and at least is pretending that he's willing to play ball with the West. Frankly, I have deep concerns about this because I think Christians are still being targeted and slaughtered in Syria, and I pray that something good will come of this meeting with the president. The president noted that Sharaa is a tough guy in a tough neighborhood, but he's praying, I think, that the alliance could be an opportunity for trade and prosperity, and perhaps the Syrians could be persuaded to abandon their evil ways. Syria was previously an ally of Russia and Iran. Under the new regime, the country could become an economic and national security ally of President Trump. President Trump talked to the Taliban, and he hosted a summit with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, so it's not surprising that he would want to create strong diplomatic ties and try to bring peace to the region by reaching out to the Syrians. It is a gamble, and once again, I'm concerned about the slaughter of Christians, but the pre-Trump foreign policy of belligerence and alienation failed miserably under Joe Biden, and before that, Barack Obama. Of course, President Trump will keep an eye on these folks, considering their past. He has got to make sure that they have actually changed their ways. Otherwise, sanctions will return, and the people of Syria will be empowered to remove him as they did Assad. Last Friday brought news that former CIA Director John Brennan was among those who have been subpoenaed by a Southern District of Florida grand jury investigating the Russian collusion hoax. It's about time. But wait, folks, there's more at play here for Mr. Brennan than meets the eye. There comes a time in the life of any government when its citizens must rise up and demand that corruption be accounted for and there be a cleansing of a decayed system which must now be implemented. Such is the time in 2025 under Donald Trump 2.0. This is an effort that cannot come at the hands of any politician with compromised strings. It must come from the grassroots. An anti-establishment threat such as Donald Trump is the perfect man to bring justice. One such patriot I can think of is Ian Trottier. We've had him here in the Stone Zone. He has a popular Miami podcast, but he's written a terrific book, High Stakes Treason: How John Brennan Compromised American Security for Millions of Dollars. This is a shocking revelation revealing treasonous activity within the swamp of Barack Obama. You can find it at highstakestreason.com. It's a terrific book, and it contains compelling evidence of alarming allegations that former Barack Obama National Security Advisor for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism and then CIA Director John Brennan intentionally compromised American security. One such scenario reported alleges that Brennan had full knowledge of the whereabouts of the Boston Marathon terrorists prior to that attack on April 15th of 2013, and he financially benefited from sequestering that vital national security intelligence for his personal financial benefit. Now, John Brennan is, of course, an admitted communist. He's also the man who got caught red-handed spying on a U.S. Senate committee that was investigating his illegal use of torture as the CIA director. He is also the man who signed visas for 4 of the hijackers who the government tells us attacked America on 9/11. So no, I have no qualms about this. It is time for John Brennan, who I believe is the key orchestrator of the Russian collusion hoax, to be brought to justice by a Florida grand jury. You're listening to the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
I'm not your stepping stone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
With the Democrats having just swept 3 off-year elections in New York, Virginia, and New Jersey, I think it's time to take another look at the role of Google and, to a lesser extent, other tech companies and social media platforms are playing in our elections. I've been following the work of Dr. Robert Epstein. He's been shouting about this issue since 2015 when he published an article in Politico called How Google Could Rig the 2016 Election. Over the years, Dr. Epstein has fleshed out this message in many articles and interviews. We've had him right here in the Stone Zone. He actually even testified twice before Congress about it, notably once before a committee chaired by Democrat Amy Klobuchar and once before a committee chaired by Republican Ted Cruz. Dr. Epstein has explained that rigorous controlled research conducted by him and his research team, all published in prestigious peer-reviewed scientific journals, shows that Google alone can shift between 20 and 80% of undecided voters towards one candidate without the people's awareness. So in a national election, they can easily shift 10 to 12 million votes or more to their favorite candidate, who is usually left-leaning. Beginning in 2016, Dr. Epstein's team developed the world's first nationwide system for preserving and rapidly analyzing this personalized, ephemeral content of big tech companies that they can use to manipulate elections, indoctrinate children, and undermine human autonomy. Content that is stored nowhere, that is normally lost forever. But Dr. Epstein and his team have figured out how to capture it. The system became fully operational in 2023, and it currently sends data 24 hours a day from computers of a political balance group of more than 17,000 registered voters in all 50 states, with, I might note, the permission of those voters. So you can view this data by going to America's digitalshield.com. This is fascinating. The monitoring system is telling us right now in real time that Google is up to its usual tricks, meaning boosting liberal content and suppressing conservative content, among other things. But this time there's a twist. You've probably heard the phrase false flag operations, but you may not know where it started. Starting in the 1500s in Mediterranean waters, while approaching their victims, clever pirates hoisted the national flag of the ship they were about to attack. By posing as friendlies, they put their victims off guard, easily overcoming them. This is exactly what Google executives have been doing to President Trump in recent months. They've been cozying up to him while setting him up, in my opinion, for a slaughter. Whether you love him or whether you hate him, everyone knows that Donald Trump is a lover of flattery, and if you throw money in his direction, all the better. But the president needs to beware. A few weeks before the 2024 election, Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, called up President Trump to wish him well, and after Google's win, the company donated $1 million towards Trump's inauguration, which earned the executive a front-row seat at that inauguration. Other big tech companies followed this lead. But at a small dinner at the White House this last year, the president thanked Pichai for letting Google off so easily. Now, as I wanted to point out, an examination of Google's actual activities demonstrates that in the days before the 2024 election, Google sent up to 50% more go vote reminders to Democrats than Republicans on its phone page, which is seen by more than 500 million people per day. When Dr. Epstein and his team went public with that, Google stopped. And for that moment, up until Election Day, Google sent roughly the same number of vote reminders to voters of both parties. That's what I mean when I say this has been extraordinarily effective. When it comes to the next election, we need to keep an eye on big tech and on these social media platforms. That's it for today. I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us here in the Stone Zone, where we talk about news, politics, history, and, dare I say it, culture. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.